Hey guys, so today I'm going to do a little Supercharger uninstall video. I've had the Supercharger installed on this car since 2014 and I haven't touched the kit since then. So I kind of want to take everything apart, take the blower off, inspect the rotors, and kind of inspect the aftercooler, because the VIT-tuned aftercooler, there's been reported issues online of it leaking inside the Supercharger manifold and burning coolant. So I haven't really had any signs of the engine burning coolant, but I just want to be safe, and since I have some downtime in the middle of the winter here. So this setup here has pretty much been maintenance free since I installed it. It hasn't given me any issues in the last 4 years. I haven't touched anything besides do oil changes on the engine itself. The coolant in the aftercooler is still the original coolant I put in it 4 years ago. I have to top it off every once in a while because it does leak a little bit when the hoses get cold. Alright, so what we're going to want to do here is take the front bumper off. I'm going to have to take this front piece off here, this plastic protector piece. Take the brace in front of the Supercharger off, the metal brace that runs the cross member between the front of the frame here. Now I got to pull that off, and that way I can get to all the bolts that secure the Supercharger to the manifold, and then just pop the belt off and get the blower out, take the intake off and stuff. It shouldn't be that bad of a job. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is take off the carbon fiber kind of fuel rail cover here, and then I'm going to work over to the belt and lower the CTE tensioner first all the way, so that takes some pressure off the hydraulic tensioner, and then I'm going to pull the hydraulic tensioner back with a couple double stacked wrenches on it, and that should allow me to pop the belt off pretty easily. This is the original belt since I put the kit on, so it's been on the car for 4 years. I haven't had an issue with the belt, and it actually looks very, very good. There's no cracks or any rips in it yet, so I know the alignment on it's very good, and I really got nothing to worry about with the belt. It's been super reliable. So the cover comes off with those two bolts. Alright, so to loosen the Comptech tensioner first, these are 3 bolts here. There's 2 nuts and then a bolt that goes through. That's a 12mm head. These two are 14s. So the 12mm right here, I'm going to go ahead and back that off. You don't need to take them out, you just need to loosen them so that you get a little play in the slots, because these holes are slotted. And then this set screw controls the height, and it's got a lock nut on it too. So crack all those loose just a little bit. Now, since those 3 are loose, they can slide up and down in slots. All you gotta do is crack the lock nut loose on this and adjust the set screw to let tension off the belt, because my current pulley setup is a stock crank pulley, a 3.0 inch blower pulley, and using the stock Comptech belt, it actually has the tensioner, the CTE tensioner, maxed out all the way, because this belt was designed to work with the 3.6 pulley and the stock crank pulley. I've taken over a ½ inch out of the blower pulley from the stock belt, so you need to raise the tensioner a lot higher to make up for that, since it's wrapped around a smaller diameter. So the lock nut here happens to be standard, it's not metric, so you're going to take your ½ inch wrench, you're going to get on the lock nut, and just pop it loose a little bit so you can rotate it up a little bit, and then you're free to adjust your set screw. This is a 5/32 Allen wrench, and I'm going to loosen this to back it down. So it doesn't take much force. You can see as I'm loosening the set screw, this is sliding down in the slots, and once you loosen it enough, this all becomes quite loose, and the belt is free. Actually, I don't even need to do anything with the factory tensioner because dropping that down all the way gives me enough slack with the belt. Here, let me zoom out a little bit. So now I can just pull the belt off around the blower pulley here. Look at that. That was super easy. I didn't expect it to be that easy to take the belt off. Didn't even have to double wrench the tensioner. I just loosened up the Comptech tensioning system here. As you can see, that slides up and down, and got the belt off very, very easy. Alright, so now I'm just going to work on popping the hybrid racing intake coupler here off the J37 throttle body. So we're doing the 2 hose clamps. Make sure these get free. They like to stick to the silicone. Slide them back, and then just pop that back. Probably a little easier to work on this in the warmer weather. It's about 40 degrees out right now, so this stuff is kind of harder to squeeze. It's more resistant. Just slide that away, and then your coupler comes off pretty easy. As you can see there, that's the mass airflow sensor in the hybrid racing intake, and then there's the opening to the J37 throttle body. It looks very clean, so there must not be a ton of blow-by from the valve cover going in there because I don't have a catch can ran from the valve cover going in there. But yeah, looks pretty damn clean in there, so that's good news. As I go along here, I always like to be very, very conscious of any way or dirt can get in the intake tract or potentially get in the engine. Cover everything up. I stuff a rag in the intake tube, and I'm going to lay rags over top of them. I'm going to do the same with the throttle body here as I pull the vacuum lines off and everything else. Alright, so next kind of plan of attack here is to take off this front cross brace member. The things you need to take off are the hood latch. It's got 3 10mm bolts. There's the reservoir fill bracket here. It's 2 10mm bolts. There's the brackets that hold the radiator to the cross member. Those are 10mm bolts on each side. And then there's a bracket that holds this whole AC condenser, and it's also connected to my aftercooler mount up front here. That needs to come out. There's 3 10mm bolts kind of on each side, and then there's one on the top here, one back here, and then there's one behind right here. And then on the other side, I believe, you got these 2, and then you got 1, 2, and then one on the back side as well. So there's 6 on each side holding it on. Alright, so that's a long extension with a wobble socket on it. It's going to make life easy. Just getting in here. Back these loose. There's actually, 3 bolts here. The wobble socket extension makes it handy to get on certain bolts that are at an angle. Alright, so once you take the 3 bolts out, and then you pop this out from the frame here, you can go in through here with a little picker tool and come out the other side to get that loose without breaking it, this little plastic clip here. And then once you do that, you just want to unplug your sensor. On the bottom of this sensor for the hood latch is connected behind the blower right there. This is the clip. Just undo that and you should be able to move your hood latch completely out of the way. Alright, so forget what I said about having to remove the brackets that hold the radiator on, because when these bolts on the corners here are taken up and you lift this piece straight up, these are just kind of slid over top of that, so this will just come right off. No need to undo these. So all you had to do is I undid the brackets holding the AC condenser on, which also holds my aftercooler. As you see, they move together. So I think there's just 6 bolts left right now. I got the ones out of the reservoir here, so you just bend this back when you go to pull this cross member up. And it's also a lot easier to get to this clip to remove it if you wait to pull this up, and then just remove it when you're kind of pulling it up. So there's many ways to do it. Alright, so once you get the 3 bolts out on each side, this thing should pretty much be ready to wiggle and come out. So you just push the reservoir bracket behind it. My AC line is bent to get over the supercharger, so you gotta kind of pop that back a little bit. Obviously we're up off the radiator now, and the only thing kind of fighting this is the hood latch is still connected here, and the wire's kind of hanging up, so you can get to it a lot easier now. So there's actually 2 clips holding me up right now from pulling this off. Everything's off, and it'll come straight up if I have to undo this bracket here, and then this white bracket here holds the whole harness on. So once you pop in a little picker tool from the front hole right here and kind of feel for the clamps and pop those tabs right out, and these will pop off, and this brace will lift straight up, and that gives you lots of room for activities. Alright, so those clips are off. This just comes straight up. Now you can have full access to the supercharger. So as you can see, without that front brace there, I have full access to the 3 nuts on the bottom that go through this, secure to the studs there to hold the blower down to the spacer and the aftercooler and everything. And there's the 3 on top, and that holds the blower to the manifold. And just take those 3 out, unhook your vacuum lines, and the supercharger will pull straight up. So down here, this is your bypass valve, which is controlled by vacuum from the engine, and we just want to cut the zip tie here and pull that off because that's the only part really connected to the blower. So I'm going to get in here, cut the zip tie off. Inspect the hoses too for their condition, see if there could be a possible source of a vacuum leak and whatnot. Alright, so your 3 vacuum hoses here are as follows. This comes off the stack right here, and that I had ran in the Vit Viper upper inlet here. This is another vacuum line that I had right to this piece that goes in the J37 throttle body, and then the other line is for the PCV catch can setup I have. Pulls vacuum on it from the fitting below. So those are the 3 ones you're going to want to undo. Make sure to unclip the connection to your throttle body as well. Alright, so now I got to figure out a way to get to the 6 bolts holding a blower on, and it could be easy if you had like stubby wrenches to get in there, but I don't. But they're pretty loose because they weren't torqued very hard, because there's an inch thick plastic gasket, thermal insulating gaskets between the it's this white piece right here between the actual machine plate and the blower manifold that creates space for the aftercooler. So it almost feels like these nuts holding the blower on, they may have came loose over the 4 years. They didn't seem to be super tight on there. So that's something you may want to recheck on yours if you've been running it for a while with different heat cycling and whatnot. These nuts to your blower may actually be a little loose. Now there's 2 there that I already undid, and then the last one's the trickiest one to get to. It's underneath the bypass valve, so if you have a stubby wrench, you'll be good. But I'm going to try a little bit shorter of a wrench here. They're all 1/2 inch. So there's a mix of metric and standard hardware with this kit. These happen to be 1/2 inch nuts, so it'd be real easy if you had a stubby wrench in here. But I'm going to do the best I can with this. Now the top ones are quite a lot easier to get to. They're out in the open a lot more, so all those are undone. Alright, so after messing around for a minute, I'm pretty sure I don't have a stubby wrench or a midget wrench to get in there, so what I'm going to do is just take the bypass valve off. There's 2 Allen key bolts. I think it's a 5mm Allen key that pops that out. And then you can kind of take that bypass valve out of there, and then I should be able to get to that nut down there a lot easier. I think that's what I did when I put this thing on. Alright, so the bypass valve is off. It's easy. Just undo the 2 5mm bolts, and that pops right off. You kind of rotates this around, and that comes out of a slot, a keyed slot that's on that piece. I put the bolts back in to remind myself the orientation, because the supercharger is not made just for the Civic Si. It's actually an Eaton MP62 blower, so depending on the car, this bypass valve could have different orientations. So I just put the bolts back in to remind myself which way it went, and then I'll put it back on when I get the blower out of the car. Now, as you can see, I can rotate this out of the way. I can get to that last nut very easy without the bypass valve there in the way. So I'm going to flip that around and then get a standard, Harbor Freight special 1/2 inch wrench down there, and see what I can do. It's a lot easier to come from the opposite side on it and then break it loose. You should have had washers, flat washers underneath the nuts when you tighten them down, so it didn't bite into the aluminum machined piece. So make sure you take the washers out down without dropping them down in. That's what they look like there. Alright, so now that we're almost ready to pull the blower, you can't forget one last thing. If you have an aftercooler, you're going to need to drain all the coolant first from the aftercooler before you go to pull the blower. So this is the drain plug on the bottom of the front mount here. Pick the camera and just show you. This here is the front mount, and down below that's your inlet hose from the water pump, which is mounted right here. It shoots coolant, from there down through this hose and fills the front mount from the bottom up. And then the coolant. This is an overflow line for overpressure. It feeds it back right to the surge tank. And then this is the line that goes from the top of the front mount and cycles up to the supercharger to cool the air coming out of the blades. So We're going to take this this plug out here. I believe it's an MPT plug. This is just basically a tapered thread to form a seal, and there's some extra pipe dope on it, I believe, to further seal it. And make sure, I'm going to try to wipe this all down, because it's, once you pop this plug out, it's gonna leak everywhere and whatnot. So I'm gonna just wipe everything down and put a clean bucket underneath, because I'd like to be able to reuse this coolant, and then when I pour it back into the reservoir, I'm gonna filter it, put a screen there, a really fine screen, so no dirt can enter the coolant system. So my bucket here is just a little too tall, so I'm just gonna jack the car up a tiny bit here to fit the bucket underneath all this, like that, so that when I pop that plug, it should all drain right in there. Alright, so this plug here is a 10mm hex plug, so got in there with that, get in here with this. It's pretty tight on there, so this is going to be interesting. Alright, it's cracked loose. Let's see what happens. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on it. As you unthread it, it should become easier because it's a tapered kind of thread. Kind of curious how the coolant will shoot out at me here. And it's going to be ice cold because it's pretty cold outside. It's already starting to leak a little. Might want to hold it up like this because it's going to come fast, I believe. There it is. A little cleaner when you got the right bucket and everything, then I imagine. This probably could be pretty messy if you just don't have a good way of capturing it. So what we're going to do is just leave this drain plug out, because there's probably pockets and whatnot inside the supercharger core that is holding coolant. So when I take the blower up, most likely some will leak back into this further. So I'm just going to let this drain and keep the plug out of it. Alright, now that we've got the coolant drained, we can begin to lift up on the supercharger. One thing I will mention, make sure you guys do, is cover this blower pulley in a rag or something, because it's very easy to knock it against any metal part in the engine bay here will damage or nick the V-grooves for the belt, and if you get any kind of burr or any kind of nick on that V-groove pattern, that 7-rib pattern, it's going to wear the hell out of your belt, and it could wear a channel in your belt. The aluminum is not going to wear down. You're going to keep throwing belts at it, and it's going to keep chewing them up. So make sure to protect that, make sure it doesn't get any kind of damage on it. And wrap that with a rag and painter's tape to hold it tight, and then everything else is ready to come up here. Alright, so I'm going to begin here to pull up on this, and I can already see that the blower is loose and ready to come right up. And the RTV, I already heard, just cracked, the seal is broke, and the only last bolt I need to get is that bottom left, because the stud's too long and it hits the bottom of this casing here. So I'm getting it up right now. That's the last bolt holding the supercharger down. I'm going to get the washer up carefully without dropping it. There's the washer, the flat washer. And now I should be able to come straight up. So the blower is completely off the studs. It's actually riding on top of the studs right now. And it's just the two large hoses in and out of the aftercooler that are holding me up and causing a pain. So I'm going to let that drain out a little more, then undo these hose clamps, pull these hoses off, top and bottom, and then there's literally nothing else holding the blower on the car. One extra thing I did here is undid my fuel rail, or my injector clip here, move this harness out of the way. That's very easy. I had the plug-and-play connectors on the Grams 1000cc injectors, so move that out of the way. That gives you a little more room with your hose here, so it's not pulling on any wires. There we go. Now it's on top of the AC line, so there shouldn't be any issues anymore. All I got to do is wait for the coolant to drain out a little more from these hoses here, and undo the hoses, and the blower is off. Alright, so here's just a quick look at everything now that it's off the car and it's still draining coolant. Looks like the aftercooler core is actually perfect, and there is no leaking coolant into the manifold that substance down there, that's oil from blow-by and whatnot. That's actually oil that got past my two air oil separators. So it's nothing but oil in the intake manifold, so that's a good sign. That means that this kit has not leaked once in the last 4 years. That's just a little oil from the blow-by, but the core itself is in perfect shape. There is no signs of leaking coolant into the manifold or anything. Alright, so it feels like everything's drained out here, so I'm going to go ahead and undo these clamps here for the hoses up top. Slide this one right off. Push the hose clamp back on the hose so I don't lose it. There's one right here on the bottom. Undo that. And here we go. Pulling the bottom hose off. It's completely off now. We're going to pull the blower straight up out of the car. There she is. It's that simple, guys. It's not that hard to put these things in. Alright guys, so here's the supercharger up on my bench here. I cleaned up the core a little bit to get the oil off of it. Just want to give you guys a close-up look of how it all goes together. Basically, this is the aftercooler core that sits inside the blower manifold, and that is secured to a anodized flat aluminum plate here that has the water inlets and outlet over on the other side. Now the coolant goes in here, flows through this whole core, and then comes out the other side. And this is secured to the aluminum plate here with smaller socket head cap screws. I think it's a 3mm hex head, so there's 4 in each corner. There's actually 5. There's one over here too in the front center. So basically the only thing holding this aluminum plate to the blower are these 6 socket head cap screws. Those are on each side. Those hold this adapting plate to the blower itself. That swaps out from the CTE plate because the CTE plate is just flat and doesn't allow you to mount a cooler to it or anything, so it just blows hot air into the manifold. So this is kind of the adapter plate that holds the core in there, and then that mounts right on top of this thick plastic spacer in here. I'm going to pull that out, and here's another close-up look at all the blow-by in the manifold over the last 4 years. Not too bad, honestly. As you can see, that's the vacuum line fitting, the barbed fitting there that runs your boost gauge and your bypass valve. And the way this works is there's one fitting coming out of the manifold and experiences the same vacuum or boost pressure that the supercharger puts out. And it's in a T here. So this side of the T goes to the bypass valve, and this side of the T goes all the way, routed up through the car, inside the cavities, into the boost gauge, which is right there. So these smaller bolts that hold the core to the aluminum plate, you don't really need, those come assembled, so you don't really need to take those off. So that's a 4mm hex for that. And then the larger bolts that hold this plate to the supercharger are a 6mm hex. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off so we can inspect the blades and everything in front of this core here. So I had these all torqued down. I can't remember the exact torque value. I believe the Comptech manual, when you buy the supercharger kit, the Comptech instructions have all the torque values in the PDF that you receive when you buy the kit. I have a copy of this PDF if anyone needs it. I can send it to you. Just drop a comment in the video. I haven't had an issue with any of these bolts breaking or anything. They're a stainless high quality bolt, so there's been no concerns of these breaking. They're very high strength, and if you torque them to the right value, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Alright, so those bolts are all off. I'm going to pull up on this and take a look. See, this is the Viper aftercooler from the top side. It's not too much oil buildup on this side because it all blew through, but yeah, there's no RTV. It's just one nice O-ring gasket pressed into this channel here on this aluminum plate. Pretty high quality stuff, looks to be. It's held up great over the last 4 years. No issues with this kit. Alright, so now that we got the plate off and the cooler off, it still looks brand new. You don't really see that logo very much with all the other stuff on the blower. This Viper logo here. You don't see that at all when it's installed, but it's pretty nice to have that. And here's a quick look at the rotors after 4 years of running this. If you look, that's the original Comptech coating on the rotor still. Everything still feels super tight. There's no play at all, and there was never any abnormal noise with this. It always ran perfect. Alright, so I pulled the inlet and the throttle body off of the blower. I just wanted you guys to check it out from the inside. This piece is such high quality and so nicely matched to the J37 throttle body that the airflow through there is completely seamless. That's the front side of it. And the back. This inlet is absolutely huge compared to the stock CTE inlet, and it's just it really provides a lot of gains and more direct airflow straight to the blades on the blower. This is the inside of the supercharger, right where the air goes after the throttle body. The blades spin like this, so they scoop the air around the outsides of each blade and they force it into the manifold. And the idea is these are so tightly toleranced that no air can re-enter through the center where these blades mate. So to summarize, everything still looks brand new after 4 years of running this thing pretty hard. The blower is in absolutely perfect condition. The throttle body and the inlet, of course, are in perfect condition. The aftercooler is perfect with no leaks, and everything else. It really impressed me to see how well it held up and how clean everything still looks underneath the hood. It sure helps a lot not to drive the car in snowy or salty weather. This car only sees nice summer days, so that's why everything is still in top-notch shape. So thanks guys a lot for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. And subscribe, leave a comment, give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. I know it's quite long, but I like to do things in very good detail because you know, these aren't very readily available YouTube videos online of this kind of procedure. So thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.